All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So today's lesson is going to be about the amendments, what they are in our Constitution, and basically the ratification of our Constitution. And it wasn't an easy thing, and that's what this lesson's about. Again, some people just kind of think that our country was started, it was formed, and boom, we got the Constitution, and that was it. And it's like, no, there's a lot of things that the framers and the founding fathers had to do to get this Constitution ratified, and how there was these two groups that were fighting over certain things in the Constitution. So that's what we're going to learn about today. Okay. So here's your objectives. We're going to analyze the process of ratification amendments, what it is, how does it work, things like that. And then we're going to critique the efforts of the Federalists to get the Constitution ratified. So one group, like I was telling you about, there's two groups. One of them is called the Federalists. You're going to find out what the other group is called. It's not very creative, but again, you know, just saying. The last one is develop a logical argument on whether George Washington was the most obvious choice to lead our country. Because we did have some pretty amazing people back then, some of the most brilliant minds at that time. But the thing is, again, was Washington the most obvious? We kind of look at it, now it's like, well, yeah, because of course, George Washington. But of all the people, was it really obvious? So we're going to have an argument on that later. All right, so here's your warm up picture. So, my question to you is this: what do you think this artist is trying to say about the Constitution of America? So, you got the guy right there, Uncle Sam. He's traditionally dressed in the stripes and the hat with the stars and stuff. And then you got this other guy next to him holding the Constitution of the United States. So, look at their facial expressions, look at their body language. What do you think this artist is trying to say about the Constitution? Does that sound like a good thing? Sound like a bad thing? One of them's, does one of them seem displeased? You know, so just analyze the picture and tell me what you think. Okay. So pause the video because we're moving on in three, two, one. All right. So amendments. These are basically things, attachments to the Constitution, just in case. Hey, you know what? We forgot something. That's the genius of the Constitution. It's not written in stone. It's more like in clay. You know, because if it's in stone, then that's it. There's no interpretation. There's just boom. It's the way it is, and you can't change things. Whereas amendments, like, well, there's something that the founding fathers, the framers, probably didn't think of because, again, like all smart people, they know one thing: they don't know everything. So that's what they do. They basically left room for a interpretation, and just in case something happens in the future generations can make it amendments to it. Now, here's the thing: it has to be first proposed, right? And it needs to pass by 2/3 in both houses of the Congress. So remember, there's the Senate and the House of Representatives. Okay, so it has to pass both houses by 2/3. Then it goes to the president. Okay, now, is there another way around it? Yes, there's another way around it. It's called the 2/3 of the states. It's called the Constitutional Convention, and it's do we really use it? No, because we have Congress, and if Congress says no to a bill, chances are the states are not going to go with it too. So, but it's just another kind of way to make things easier, just as another option if you want to go with that. Okay, and in that with that second way, the proposal would have to have 3/4 of the legislation. So it's even harder to go with that way. So that's why it's not really used all too much. Like, hard, I think if ever, we ever used it really. Um, but yeah. Okay. Now the Constitution is written. It's ready to be accepted, and this is where ratification comes in. Ratification is the seal of approval. We agree to it. Now, in order for the amendments in the Constitution to be uh, ratified back then with the whole original 13 colonies, 9 states had to approve it. Okay. Now, the first state to say, okay, yes, we're signing off on it, we like it the way it is, was Delaware. Delaware signed it on December 7th, 1787. And right after that, several other states signed it: Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Georgia, Connecticut. All right. So now you got 5 states. They still need 4 more. And this is where those other states were like, yeah, we're kind of having a problem with it, with the Constitution. We don't like the way it is. And this is where some states were like, are you kidding me? Guys, we need a functioning government. Our everything's going horrible. Again, they're having a recession. Trade disputes are happening. Um, the government is going more and more into recession. It's just horrible right now. And here's these guys. Well, there's something we don't like. So really upsets them. Now, what was upsetting them? Okay, so the first group that was getting kind of annoyed, like, hey, just sign the documents and let's get this whole thing started. That group, they felt that a strong central government was truly needed, and that's what the Constitution would do. These guys called themselves the Federalists. Now, what kind of average citizen supported Federalists? Large property owners, merchants, artists, in bigger cities, and farmers who really traded with overseas companies and countries. They were mostly Federalist. Again, they wanted a strong government because they did not want what happened with the Articles of Confederation to happen again. Now, the other group, they felt, what, yeah, a national government is needed. It does need to be strong, but it should not be all powerful. We don't want an all powerful government. And these guys call themselves, creatively, the anti federalist. So you have the federalist and the anti federalist. Okay. And the anti federalist basically said, okay, what we really want is a Bill of Rights. We want on paper saying these are the rights of the citizens. That way the government doesn't trample on their rights. So here's the thing. We're gonna look at the Federalist first. Okay, so on your worksheet paper, it's the side on your left side first. The Federalists wrote a collection of essays that supported the new Constitution. They wrote like 85 of them. Alexander Hamilton, I believe, wrote like 50 by himself, 50 or 60 of them. So basically, the essay stated that the new Constitution solved all the problems of the Articles of Confederation, and it basically limits the power of the government itself. So we don't need a Bill of Rights. We don't need something on paper saying people have the right to this, people have the right to that. They're like that list will be way too long. You know, they're like it's fine the way it is. It says what the powers of the government is, what they can't do, things like that. So just sign it and let's get this done with. So famous people who were Federalists were, like I said, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, John Jay. Now the Anti-Federalists, um, especially the Northern Anti-Federalists, opposed slavery. The Southern Anti-Federalists, they still favored slavery because again, that is how their economy rolled. They really relied on slaves to get things going in their part of the states. And you have to remember, slavery under the Constitution still existed. Okay. Now they felt that states would lose power under this new Constitution because the government was so powerful, has so much power, you know, than it did in the Articles of Confederation. And they felt that, well, the government's going to take over and they're going to push their will on the people, and the states are not going to be able to do anything. And again, they were like, we still want something on paper saying this are your rights as citizen. So they were not budging. Some of the most famous people who were anti-federalists were like Patrick Henry, Samuel Adams. Yes, the guy that's named after the beer because he was a brewer. Okay, John Hancock, George Mason. These were anti-federalist. Now, in Massachusetts, there was a bunch of anti-federalists, okay? And the Federalists made a deal with them saying that if they ratified the Constitution, they promised to add the Bill of Rights, okay? And they agreed. Now, I've said this in class quite a bit of times. I know nowadays when someone says, "Hey, I promise you, I promise," you tend to not believe them or trust them unless you really know the person and they haven't burned that bridge yet. But if it's a stranger, typically you wouldn't trust them. You have to remember back then when people gave their word, that was it. Especially somebody that people knew. You know, people like George Washington, Ben Franklin, and some of that. So when they said, "We promise we'll add this," that was their word. That was worth more. And some people worth more than gold. And your word is all you had, really. you know so when these guys were saying, "We promise we'll add it, just ratify it first and then we'll add it," they agreed. Okay, because again, a lot of those guys were trustworthy. So in 1791 they promised to lead the adoption of the first 10 amendments, which would be known as the Bill of Rights. Okay, now with the promise of the Bill of Rights to be added, Maryland ratified the Constitution. South Carolina said, "Oh, they promised? Okay, boom, they signed it." New Hampshire ratified it. Um, Now here's the thing: if you kept me keeping count, now they made it. They made the total number of states to ratify the Constitution. But there's two states that were huge: New York and Virginia. Now, technically, they didn't need those states, but those two states alone carry 30% of the total population of the United States. And remember, there's still a couple other states that haven't ratified the Constitution. I believe there's two more. And the thing is, yeah, it's like barely over half the country acknowledges the Constitution. So the Federalists knew, like, yeah, we need to get more states, at least New York and Virginia. If those two get aboard, then we're good. So two guys go to Virginia: George Washington, who lived in Virginia, and James Madison. Now they go to the Virginia Convention in 1788, and everyone again loves George Washington, so he shows up, just Mr. Chingon, and hey, how you guys doing, this and that. And everyone's like, "Oh my God, George Washington," this and that. But some of those people are like, "Oh, he's going to try to convince us to ratify this Constitution." So Washington and Madison give a really strong argument for ratification. But it wasn't until Madison said, "Look, guys, we promise we will add the Bill of Rights. It will be added, okay? You have our word that it will be added." Again, people are starstruck with Washington, and Madison, but they're still kind of hesitant, so they call for a vote, and it passes. 89 saying yes, 79 saying no, which is 52%. And you just need a simple majority, which is 51%. So this ratification passed for Virginia by the skin of their teeth. Okay, so while all this is going on in New York, you have people like Alexander Hamilton and John Jay. They're at the New York convention and they're delaying the vote. They're trying to give their arguments, and the thing is, Alexander Hamilton is one of the best speakers. He can talk and talk very well. He didn't just talk about facts and that. He was a people person. He could actually talk. And John Jay again is one of the more legal people, and he's trying to ease people's mind, discuss with them, and things like that. The whole time they're doing this, again, they're delaying until news comes in that, hey, New Hampshire, Virginia, they have ratified the Constitution. So now Alexander Hamilton and John Jay go, okay, Everyone, can we have your attention, please? Listen up. Um, all you guys are anti-federalists. I know we've been talking to you guys, this and that, and you have a vote coming up. But here's the thing: Virginia and New Hampshire, which are very strong anti-federalist places, they have agreed to ratify the Constitution. We have the numbers now. So if you don't ratify this Constitution, you guys are going to be on your own. You're not going to be part of the United States. You're going to be independent. Okay, and that means you won't have support from us. The money, uh, soldiers, protection, from foreign invaders, things like that. So good luck. But I would strongly urge that you guys ratify this Constitution. And they did on July 28th, 1788. Now, the only two states left that didn't ratify the Constitution was New Hampshire, for one, which shouldn't surprise you guys by now, because again, New Hampshire didn't, or Rhode Island didn't even send delegates to the Constitutional Convention and stuff like that, and North Carolina. Okay, but other than that, everyone else ratified it. Those two states would eventually ratify the Constitution. Okay, but it would take like several years. Uh, the Confederation Congress meets with those two states and basically talks them into it. Now March 4th, 1789 is a historic day. It's the first time that the new Congress of the Constitution of the United States meets. Okay, and the new government is now set. We have the Constitution ready, saying what the powers of the governments are. People are ready to go to work, but again, people are on edge. People are kind of nervous because there's no guarantee that this Constitution will work. It might be like the Articles of Confederation, and it'll go well for the first couple of years, and all of a sudden break down, and then we're in a chaotic mess again. So people are kind of shaky. But the thing is, we've elected our first president under the new Constitution, and he's very confident that this Constitution will work, everything will go well. And it's because of that confidence of George Washington in the Constitution, a lot of people feel more at ease, you know. And on top of that, he has one of the best cabinets of all time. The people who are helping and supporting him, his vice president, his secretary of state, secretary of treasury, secretary of war, those guys are the top guys, top minds in our country. So a lot of people are like, if he's confident, I'm confident. All right, so here is your question um, for this lesson. Do you believe George Washington was the most obvious choice to lead our country, to be our first leader, be our first president? You have to remember, we had people like Ben Franklin, who was world famous and still on top of his game. You had people like Alexander Hamilton, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, John Jay, just these amazing minds when it comes to government and law and stuff like that. But do you think that most people had more confidence in those guys? Or do you think they had just like, no, no, it had to be Washington? Washington just made people feel better and things like that, because he was the revolutionary hero and things like that. He presided over the constitutional conventions and things like that. Or do you think it was more like, no, 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 there was other options. It's just, you know, Washington was just better. So what do you think? Do you think he was the most obvious choice? Yes, no? And there's a writing prompt on the bottom there to help you guys out if you don't know how to start the sentence. Okay. Now, once you finish this question, you are done with this lesson. Okay. Now, the next lesson is going to be on how our country started. Because remember, there's no guarantee that everything's going to be hunky dory, but Washington did have one of the greatest crew backing him up. Okay. So, with that being said, guys, you take care, you be safe, and I'll see you guys later. Okay.